Councillor Julian Bell. I'm the leader of Ealing Council. My address is Ealing Town Hall, New Broadway, London W52BY.
And the other gentleman, please.
Yes, my name is Councillor Hitesh Tailor. I'm the Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Services. And my address is Ealing Council, Ealing Town Hall, New Broadway, London W52BY.
In front of you, there should be a volume labelled Volume 1. And at pages 71 to 358, you should find the submission prepared by and on your behalf. Can you confirm that those submissions are true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and understanding, and that you wish them to stand as your evidence to the Commission?
Yes.
Can I ask you first about the consultation process? If you look at your document, and it's page 77 I'd like you to go to, please, paragraph 5. You detail there what you perceive as lack of public participation, and you set out a figure of 360 members of the public attending events. Where does that come from?
These were figures that Shaping a Healthier Future events led to. And I have to say they were very much confined to well, just one event in Ealing Town Hall. We requested as the council that there be events in other parts of the borough. Particularly, we wanted an event to be held, a consultation event held in Southall, where some of the greatest need and highest numbers of users of Ealing Hospital are located. But that never transpired. So, as has been said by Mr. Pound earlier, very, very low engagement in the formal consultation processes by SHAF, but incredible engagement in terms of opposition from local residents with rallies and marches and people signing petitions.
I'm just going to ask you to comment on a sentence in a letter from, and it's not in fact from Ealing CCG, it's from the Hammersmith and Fulham CCG. And what is said there is this: the public consultation we globally undertook for SAHF demonstrated overwhelmingly that what our residents want most is high quality healthcare for their families, communities and them as individuals. I wonder, could I invite you to comment on whether or not that helps in terms of the specific changes that are taking place?
Well, I think it's clear that our residents want quality healthcare services, and one of the issues that we had with the whole SHAF process and the decision-making process was that the reconfiguration was based on distance to the various options for major hospitals, and it wasn't based on quality of care. And also, I'd add, there was no reference to the needs particularly, or that wasn't given a higher rating in terms of the decision-making process of the reconfiguration. So I think we very much want quality of care to be at the heart of changes to the NHS for our residents. But actually, if you look at these proposals, Ealing, which is the third largest borough in London, with an extremely fast-growing population, is the borough that loses out the most. Not only do we lose the hospital, the only hospital within the borough, Ealing Hospital, and its A&E services and maternity services, and it's downgraded to a local hospital, but all of the other surrounding, most proximate hospitals to Ealing's, many of which are used by our residents, are also being downgraded or having facilities closed at them. So I can't see how that can be an improvement in quality of our health services for our residents.
Now, you also point to, sorry, did you?
No.
You also point to a lack of engagement with the local authority. What attempts did the local authority make to address this?
Again, it was a process where we were very much on the outside. Both myself as the leader of the council and senior officers and the health cabinet members over a period of time leading up to the proposals requested meetings, requested information, but we were only really brought in when the decisions were made effectively in terms of the proposals as they stood. We had very little engagement or involvement in the decision-making process, and that was a great frustration which we tried to put right, but were unfortunately unable to.
I'd like to look now at some of the issues that underpin the Shaping a Healthier Future programme. First of all, on page 72 of your submission, you set out that you do not consider that out-of-hospital provision will reduce acute need in the way envisaged. Can you help with the basis of that view, please?
Well, I think we actually have a long way to go in terms of our primary and community care in Ealing. As Mr. Pound earlier said, we have a lot of single GPs, and I think, as he again said, it's a patchy service, and we have some way to go. You could argue that the resources that the NHS have had in the last 10 years before austerity kicked in, that we probably could have seen improvements to primary care community services in that time, but we haven't. I think as a council we're very much wanting and have been very positively engaged as a council in terms of integrating social care with health care to improve community care. But I think our concerns are that with a rising population, a particularly fast-growing elderly population with specific health needs to some of the ethnic groups within our borough, that we need to have sufficient acute services to meet those needs and those growing population demands. And I might add that I don't think that the figures that are being used by Shaping a Healthier Future in terms of population and need in the future are anything like what the reality is or will now and in the future.
I wanted to come on to ask you about the population figures next. First of all, if they aren't correct, can you help us with to what scale they aren't correct?
Well, the first thing to say is we've got a population at the moment on ONS figures of about 350,000, and we've interestingly got a significant what's described as a shadow population because of the makeup of our borough and its population, with many new immigrant communities, and we have on our GP rolls about 405,000 people. So, maybe 50,000 shadow population potentially. That's the current situation. Going forward by 2031, we will have a population of 405,000. These are significant increases of 9% going forward, but the elderly population of over 65s will increase by 30% in that time. the figures that are produced by SHAF don't include new developments and those potential increases in population that are associated with those new developments. We have massive investment in our borough as a result of the 5 Crossrail stations that we have. So just alone in the Southall Gasworks development, which will take place over the next 15 years up to 2030, there will be nearly 4,000 new homes in the Southall Gasworks development. You can then add to that the new developments that are going to be around the HS2 Crossrail interchange at Old Oak Common, which is one of the most significant new developments across the whole of London. You know, again, I believe it's about, and Hitesh can correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 11,000 new homes or potentially more. It's 20,000 new homes. It's a significant number of new homes. There are many other new developments that are happening in addition to those 2 really big ones.
So bearing in mind the answer you've just given, what's the scale of the impact on the projections for future demand of the services?
Well, this has always been our concern, that we've felt that SHAF didn't actually acknowledge the true nature of the increased demand on A&E and on maternity services, and you know, across the board, in London there's a 5% increase in terms of A&E usage, but I think given the increases in population that we're experiencing and going to continue to experience, then it will be a significant impact. And I just think this is the largest scale reconfiguration in the NHS's history, and they are effectively using our residents, my residents in Ealing, as guinea pigs in this experiment, which is of a scale that's not been entered into before. And I just think the risks are huge, given the demand and the capacity, because once you take the capacity out, it's hellishly difficult to put it back.
Can I just ask you, please, about something else you've said, and it's at page 77 of your submissions at the top, and you refer to a view that you hold that the reconfiguration is driven by a need to resolve ongoing private finance initiative issues at Central Middlesex. I wonder if you could just expand and explain a little bit more about that, please.
Yes, and certainly, again, as Mr. Pound has said, the reconfiguration is being driven by financial issues. And there are issues around the PFI at Central Middlesex, but actually the other PFI which has impacted on Ealing the most is at West Middlesex. In the reconfiguration options that were put, Ealing was twinned with West Middlesex, and it was commonly known before the process had even begun, once it was kind of said that Ealing would be twinned with West Middlesex, was that we had no chance in terms of the future of Ealing Hospital as a major hospital, because the financial problem that West Middlesex had with its PFI was driving the whole process, and that meant it was inconceivable for West Middlesex not to be the major hospital, and for Ealing to lose out and be the local hospital. And again, I'd reiterate the point that these decisions were financial and based on distances, which again were not independently, travel times were not independently verified. They were not made looking at need. and they were also not looking at options to make those financial savings in other ways other than reconfiguration. We were given no option as to whether or not you could make those financial savings in another way besides reconfiguration. It was signed, sealed and delivered and done before we even started.
Now, you already set out your view that the impact on Ealing has been greater than on other areas. I just wanted to ask you to comment on something. You'll see in front of you volume 2. I think it's probably underneath that bundle. Would you mind turning, please, to page 674? If I explain what this is a submission by Health Watch Ealing, and I just want to ask your view about something they've said. Now, at paragraph 3, they're talking about A&E closures, and what they say is this: only a small number of Ealing residents are directly affected by this change. I wonder if I could invite you to comment on that.
Well, not wishing to. Well, you'll have an opportunity to talk to Ealing Health Watch later, but actually, if you look at our submission, 56% is the numbers of our residents that are going to be impacted by the changes in A&E services. So I'm struggling mightily to understand how 56% can be a small number of Ealing residents directly affected. So yeah, I'm bemused.
I wanted to ask a little bit now about some of the accident and emergency issues. Now, according to Shaping a Healthier Future, there will still be an A&E facility at Ealing Hospital. Can I ask you to help the Commission with your understanding of what that service will be?
Well, I've heard it from the lips of various NHS managers, and they've said this to me on numerous occasions, that notwithstanding what the Secretary of State for Health said, when he said that Ealing and Charing Cross's A&Es were saved and will be of a different size and shape, what I've been told very clearly is that they will be no different to the original shaft proposals, which were that they are effectively minor injuries urgent care centres that are GP-led, not consultant-led. They won't take blue light ambulances. They won't have intensive care units attached to them. And effectively, as far as our residents are concerned, and any normal person's understanding of what an A&E is, they certainly will not be A&Es. And I have to say, I have serious concerns about standalone urgent care centres and the delays that will occur when you have to then, having triaged people and decided that they need A&E treatment, that London Ambulance Service, which is not really delivering what is required for our residents, that you've got that extra journey to another A&E after they've come into an urgent care centre standalone one. So yeah, I'm convinced that they will not be A&Es.
Do I take it from the answer you've given that your view, you have a view about there not being co-location between urgent care centres and A&Es? They will not be co-located, and I'm told again that the GPs that lead them will be able to, I don't know whether they're going to Skype or what, but they'll talk to consultants at networked A&Es nearby. But again, you have to worry for your residents' safety if trained emergency personnel are not looking at their needs when they immediately come in to that urgent care centre. So I'm very worried about, and there's certainly a
a lot of scope for confusion about where do you go. Do you go to an A&E? Do you go to a separately located urgent care centre? I think it puts lives at risk with the confusion.
Councillor Tailor.
Yes, I mean, just to add on to what Councillor Bell has said, because I represent East Hampton Ward, and we've had the two A&Es, both in Central Middlesex and Hammersmith shut. And I know residents in my ward particularly experience that confusion which has arisen. They go to the urgent care centre because that's, well, Central Middlesex, that's where they've always gone, and actually now told, actually we now have to go somewhere else. And I had a case last night reported to me from a resident, her 89-year-old father went for an x-ray, couldn't get the x-ray, and then had to go to St Mary's, and had to then face a 4 or 5 hour wait there. So it's already having an impact for residents in that part of the borough already.
Can you perhaps help us say with specifics, for example, what distance, how long would it take, I'm not talking about somebody who's blue lighted here, a resident in Southall to get to an A&E provision if there isn't one in Ealing?
Well, I certainly don't believe the journey times that have been put in the Shaft business case. As I've already said, they were not independently verified. I won't even go into Dr. Spencer's motorbike, but as an Acton resident, I certainly know that it doesn't take you 15 minutes to get from Acton down to St Mary's. Again, as Mr. Pounder said earlier, the distances and the difficulty of getting from Ealing Hospital or Southall to Northwick Park is considerable. You're certainly upwards of an hour and a couple of bus journeys and changes if you are making that journey on public transport. Again, another interesting thing, and I don't know whether you're going to come onto it, is the maternity unit closing at Ealing and journey times for moms that are in labour. Again, the evidence that was considered by the CCG at its meeting this week didn't. We don't have what their official journey times are for pregnant moms in terms of the distances to alternative maternity units, and I actually highlighted at that meeting what are called BBAs. Births before admissions is what I've now found a new piece of NHS jargon, which I have personal experience of, which you may have seen in the Evening Standard a couple of nights ago, in that my daughter had a BBA last summer, and even Dr. Mark Spencer admitted that his sister had a BBA in a hospital car park. But I have real concerns if you increase those journey times for women in labour by closing our maternity unit, that increases the risk. Again, the journey times are significant, but we don't know what they are.
Just before we turn to the maternity services in more detail, can I just ask you, still thinking about the A&Es though, if you have any comment on the choices of the A&Es which are being kept open and expanded, with the background feature being the CQC analysis of the various qualities of the various different A&Es across the region.
It comes back to my, this is the kind of reality now of the point that I made right at the beginning, that we're having our ability to choose and want quality healthcare services is now being compromised by these decisions. So effectively, the CQC says that the A&E service at the closing Central Middlesex A&E is better than the A&E service that we're all being redirected to at Northwick Park, and that is not adequate, and clearly we're being and again there are issues around maternity services as well, where Ealing Hospital has been performing well. Again, the CQC said that Northwick Park was inadequate. There are issues about lack of midwives at Hillingdon Hospital. So it's clear from CQC that quality is actually being taken away, and we're being directed to hospitals which are of a lesser quality, and that is again something that we've not had addressed in the broader decision making about where the priorities, the choices were made about the reconfiguration. Quality was not the foremost decision making criteria by those making the decision, whereas for residents and clinicians it was. The final point I'd make is that there is a clinical case that smaller A&Es perform better than larger A&Es, and that is very much reflected in that CQC assessment of Central Mid, the smaller A&E doing better than the bigger Northwick Park. So I don't accept the clinical argument for bigger is better. The evidence is to the contrary.
Can we have a look a little bit more in detail now at the maternity unit? First of all, who is served by the maternity unit at Ealing?
We're a large borough, and we do have our mothers go to different maternity units. I live in the east of the borough in Acton, and my children were born at Queen Charlotte's. And the east part of the borough, I think it's fair to say that some mums do go to Ealing, but not all. Some will go to Queen Charlotte's. However, there's a significant number of our mothers who would go from Central Ealing, from Hanwell, Greenford, Southall. Their maternity unit of choice is Ealing, and of course we've just invested £2 million in upgrading and improving the maternity unit at Ealing Hospital, and putting a new birth centre in, which has been part of the reason why the performance in recent years has improved. And so again, there are questions to be raised about the use of financial resources, in that we've just made this investment of 2 million and then we're striking it off.
How easy will it be for the population that uses the maternity unit at Ealing to go elsewhere?
I think it will be incredibly difficult. You are talking considerably longer distances, not only for the actual delivery, but for relatives and family to subsequently then go and visit. So the plan is to move some of the births to Northwick Park, some to Hillingdon, some to West Middlesex, and also some to Queen Charlotte's that were previously going to Ealing. But for those who are living in the centre of the borough and to the west of the borough, these are considerable extra distances that they're going to go to. And again, we don't actually know exactly what the assessments are from the CCG as they're making their decision. And again, I'll refer to my BBA experience. The ambulance didn't turn up in time, so my son-in-law delivered the baby, which I have to say, massive respect to him. It was probably more stressful for my wife and I, worrying about what happened, but the ambulance didn't turn up. It was an emergency. It took 18 minutes for the ambulance, and the child was already born 5 minutes before the ambulance arrived, delivered by my son-in-law. But those incidents of BBAs will increase inevitably if you're having longer journey times to hospital. I don't want to overdo it, because it's not a large percentage in terms of BBAs, but it's about 1%, I believe. But nevertheless, the risks are huge when you don't have that medical support.
Now, just thinking a little bit about the delays in decision making over the maternity unit. First of all, two parts to this. Can you throw any light on the reasons for those delays? And secondly, what do you say the impact is on staff and users?
Well, the Commission's received the open letter that the midwives at Ealing Hospital wrote about a month or so ago, where they talked about their frustrations and about their lack of morale, given how hard and how loyal they've been, how determined they've been to keep a good and safe service going right through this time of change. But I think they've been tested beyond breaking point almost, and it is affecting them. It's affecting patients, and as Mr. Pound said, that some midwives who've got literally, cumulatively hundreds of years of NHS experience between them, we're losing that, and that has to have an impact on the quality of the service, in my view. And again, it's we always said that all of these reconfigurations, we should have alternative services in place before you make the decision to actually reconfigure. But the decisions were made before any alternatives were in place, and we've seen the chaos that happened after the closure of the A&Es at Central Middlesex and Hammersmith in terms of worst waiting times in the country for type 1 A&E admissions. All of that has meant that the alternative services are not in place before the decisions before implementation, but actually making the decisions so early on becomes self-fulfilling. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and therefore, it potentially becomes an unsafe service, and you have to close it down because it's unsafe, because you've already made the decision, and the axe is already over the service, be it a maternity or an A&E service, and that's the problem we're faced with.
Can we look now, because you've brought us onto it, to the primary care services aspect? First of all, in your view, can the primary care services in the area cope at the moment with the demand they're under?
No, I don't believe they can. I think the examples that SHAF give in their business case are quite small scale examples. They don't address the scale of the challenge that is before us. I think the fact of those worst in the country figures for A&E waiting times at Northwick Park and at Ealing in the latter part of last year and the early part of this year show that the whole system isn't coping. The primary care system isn't coping, and the emergency services are not coping either. So I think and this is what we always warned would happen. You know, it's not as if, well, they weren't warned. We've said this all along, that this would happen, and lo and behold, it has, and that's what actually is what makes me quite angry, because, you know, this was quite foreseeable.
Can I ask you just to address briefly the issue of in-borough variation on quality of services, please? Assuming that you are saying that there is in-borough variation, that is.
In terms of primary care, yeah, as I've already said, and Mr. Pound said, there is a variation. I think there's, as has been said, a large number of close to retirement, single GP practices, some of which are very good, but they don't always have the capacity to meet the needs of their patients, and it's I'm sure when Dr. Sahota speaks, he will probably give you a much closer kind of view of that. But certainly, you know, we know that there are improvements and it required, and also, you know, one of the issue that we as councillors get brought up with us is the difficulties of lack of access to GP appointments and the length of time that it takes to get an appointment with a GP. You know, I not too recently tried to get an appointment with my GP, and it was over 2 weeks.
Yes, I mean, I know Councillor Burham, his own surgery is actually in my ward, actually, because he's talking about 3-week waits, is what residents report. I mean, his particular surgery, there's only 3 practitioners in my ward, which is now the largest in the borough. There's his particular one, plus a sole practitioner, Western Avenue, plus one on the Uxbridge Road. And given the scale of developments happening, that demand, that GP provision is absolutely increasing. Every local meeting I go to, that's what residents are asking for in terms of infrastructure to be put in place, given the scale of developments we've got coming forward. So actually the impact, we go back to the earlier point about the loss of the 2 A&Es at Central Middlesex and Hammersmith has had that impact.
And just thinking that in terms of the initiatives that SAF says have been put in place, and you heard me earlier read some of those out to Mr. Pound, the increasing cardiovascular services and so on and so forth. Are you seeing any positive impact from those initiatives yet? And if so, what?
I think it's still too early to say that we're seeing massive or significant improvements. As I've said before, we as the council are very committed to integrating services with social care and health, and we're working very hard. I chair the Health and Wellbeing Board as well as being leader of the council, and I know that we are working extremely hard to work together to improve care pathways and do these things. But we're still at an early stage. You know, we've not put those new integrated services together. We've just started recruiting at the beginning of this year to the new ways of the posts that integrate care at primary level, and we're at the stage of training those new people in those new coordinating positions. So we're still too early, I think, to see any impacts that are going to, and hence the kind of meltdown that we saw in terms of A&E waiting times and increases in hospital admissions.
So just thinking now about those new services, the out-of-hospital services, how heavily do you say the success of the out-of-hospital strategy relies on local authority rather than National Health Service provision. And I'm going to ask a supplemental question, so I'll ask it now, is do you have the budget for it?
Well, I'll answer that first one first, the last one first. Obviously, we welcome the monies that we're getting for the Better Care Fund, which is allowing us to work with the CCG as the council, and in Ealing it's about 26 million for the Better Care Fund. However, we have £38 million of cuts to our adult social care, and so it's actually it's to some it's probably a bandage rather than sticking plaster, the Better Care Fund, but it, you know, the resources that we have as the council are significantly reducing, and it's the what's known as the Barnett graph of doom, where basically by 2018-19, if as I've said, this 30% increase in elderly population, part of the graph goes up. That's one part of the graph of doom. And the financial resources that are coming to councils is the downward part of the graph of doom. By 2018-19, when those two parts of the graph cross, we as a council, and this is the same for councils all over the country, will only be able to provide those kind of statutory care services, and I think we might just be able to collect the bins and the rubbish. But any other of our services, we won't be able to provide, because unless there's a change in national policy in terms of actually ring-fencing social care budgets in the same way that health care budgets are being protected, because at the moment they're not being, and you know, frankly, I don't know how we're going to manage as a council to meet those statutory social care responsibilities that we have with a reducing budget. And you know, it's not just me. The National Audit Office says that in 2018-19, 50% of councils will not be financially solvent if things stay as they are. So, sorry, I've forgotten your first part of the question now.
It was whether or not, how heavily the out-of-hospital strategy depended upon local authority services and provision.
Yeah, and I think it does. And one of the interesting things of Lord Darcy's London Health Commission was the way that commission's findings were very, very much focusing on and looking towards local authorities and local government as being a primary player in finding health solutions. So with public health coming in to local authorities, we've got district nurses coming into local authority control as of October of this year. They're critical to it, but we don't have the resources.
Thank you. Those are the questions I'm sorry, do finish.
I think, just to quickly, I mean, he's quite right about the health visitors coming in, because there is an underfunding on that level, first of all. The second thing, just to bear in mind, that as from April, to go back to Councillor Bell's earlier point, is that we've got the Care Act coming in as well, which is placing new eligibility thresholds for people who want to access entitlement to social care. And there's a serious level of a serious underestimate of the amount of resources that we're going to require to meet new needs, and that's, you know, that's coming from national level in terms of the criteria that's been applied, but local government will inevitably have to pick up the cost of that as well.
Thank you. If you'd like to wait there may be questions from the commissioners.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you, for the presentation. I have a barrage of questions, and there's just going to be enough time, but I want to see if we can get through a number of them, which I think are important. First of all, I'll take them one by one and put them in encapsulated form. The first one is this, that you mentioned the need over the last, I think you mentioned 10 years, that there was a patchy service being provided in primary care and so on. And it's a lock-on to that question, is leave aside all these plans, what would you have seen as the best way forward? In other words, what were there shortcomings, and how could they have been addressed other than in a finance-driven policy, which seems to be the thrust of what you're saying this present policy is? So that's one question. Now, it's a rather big question, and you may not be able to put it in summary form. If not, you can always write about it later. I have a specific question. Has land already been sold off at Ealing Hospital? So we heard last week from a urologist there that land had already been fenced off and he didn't know what it was for. And then thirdly, I have quite a few questions on maternity. One is when the investment of 2 million was made, and a follow-on question in relation to what Healthwatch are saying. So there are 4 questions there. I'm sorry, they're rather far-reaching, but I wondered if you could address some of them, if not all, both of you.
Yeah. Well, in terms of primary care improvements and the issue of the patchiness of provision, we have, and I think we need to move more towards networks of GPs or co-located GPs, and certainly we've got that in Acton and in Greenford, and in some other parts of the borough. But I think, again, as Mr. Pound said earlier, the concept of polyclinics or co-located GPs who can then work together to give a better quality service is, in my view, what would have been ideal if we could have moved that forward quicker and earlier over the last 10 years. In terms of land sold off at Ealing Hospital, we of course are the planning authority, so we do kind of keep in quite close contact, or my office is keeping close contact with all landowners. I am not aware of any land having been sold off. However, there are proposals which have been given planning permission and are progressing in terms of the West London Mental Health Trust and St Bernard's, which is adjacent to Ealing Hospital. So there are developments happening in that part of the site that we as a council are fully aware of. But all I know is that Shaff says that Ealing Hospital will be bulldozed and levelled, and that we've got new proposals for a local hospital which will be further to the east of where the current footprint of the hospital is, closer to where the River Brent is.
Specific question was, this is maternity. When was the £2 million investment made?
I believe that has been made in the period from 2011 through to the present. It was kind of put in place about a year, so 2011 to 2013/14, I believe. The Prime Minister himself, when asked a question at PMQs by the Ealing Southall Member of Parliament, Virendra Sharma, when he asked him at PMQs back in, I think it was June 2011, if I recall, what was the future for both the A&E and the maternity unit at Ealing. The Prime Minister said that there were no plans for for closure of the maternity unit, and there was a kind of ongoing investment in it. So it was referred to by the Prime Minister himself, and I'm sure we could find you the relevant section of Hansard. In fact, I think Mr. Sharma wrote a recent article on the Ealing Gazette website which references all of this. So yes, I think that's partly why the midwives themselves are so dispirited by what's happened, because they saw that investment coming in and saw the improvements to the facilities, and the quality of service has improved as a result of that investment, and now it's all going to be taken away.
Now, one further question. It relates to Health Watch, which you've already been directed to. I don't know where it is in the bundle, but I'll just read you the paragraph. Because what I want to know is, what on earth does this mean? This is Ealing maternity transition. This is what they say. Members of Health Watch Ealing have been much more involved in the development of these plans and have been successful in having additional engagement and research undertaken during the early phases of this project. This work led to a remodelling of the numbers of women who would go where. Do you have an understanding of this?
Well, the first point is that there's two things I'd say about Health Watch's involvement in the earlier phase of the SHAF proposal developments. They're clearly saying that they had very little engagement in those, and I think that's right. I also, I'm not, and I don't want to cast aspersions on Health Watch, but I do question, and again, when I referred to their comments about only a small number of Ealing residents being affected by the A&E changes, I think it's common knowledge that residents don't think that the local Health Watch have represented their views very well. And you can...
Well, that may be so, but sorry.
I think things have improved, and I think that they've improved in terms of their engagement with these maternity transition proposals. But again, if you want to clarify exactly what you were trying to tease out on that part, I'd be happy to try and respond.
Well, it's the remodelling. What are they talking about? Do you know?
Well, certainly they've changed the numbers that in the transition that are going to of mothers going to the alternative hospitals, maternity units. So I don't know, there's been a reduction in the numbers that were projected to go to Northwick Park. Now, whether that was because of Health Watch's intervention and because basically what they're doing is they're reconfiguring the boundaries of where mothers will be referred or encouraged to go to particular maternity units, and so it means that they're having to reallocate all of those Ealing Hospital maternity mothers to all the different hospitals. There's been some changes in the numbers, and I know there's a reduction in the numbers that were going to go to Northwick Park. That I don't know the reason why. It may be because of concerns about the quality of service at Northwick Park. It may be because the capacity is now not thought to be there at Northwick Park. Another reason for the delay at the moment is that there are estate works that need to be done at Cllrs, and they have not been completed. So again, there's a capacity problem at Cllrs, and there's the issue of not having sufficient midwives at Hillingdon as well.
Thank you. I wanted to take you back to the Independent Reconfiguration Panel report. and as I recall it from the discussions at the time, they more or less agreed to the closure of the two A&Es at Central Middlesex and Hammersmith, but they expressed much more conditional support for the proposals in relation to Ealing and in fact and Charing Cross, and were actually specifying that certain additional planning needed to take place. They even raised possibly the question of a further consultation. It's pretty obvious from what's happened that a number of the things that the reconfiguration panel were told would be put in place before these things happen have not been put in place. Is Ealing maybe contemplating another referral back to the reconfiguration panel to revisit these proposals and see whether or not we can't actually get them to revise their estimate in more realistic terms?
I would certainly concur with what you've said, and certainly as a council, we were certainly looking to probably follow in the footsteps of Enfield Council, who were basically promised all kinds of alternative services when Chase Farm A&E was closed, but when in fact reality has progressed, they've not had those alternative services provided, and Enfield went down the JR route in order to question the legality of the decision and the fact that they'd not been given what they were promised. We are certainly keeping that option open, and I'm certainly open to the idea of perhaps going back to the IRP, because that was the one encouraging part of their report, that there should be more engagement, which I have to say I haven't seen or experienced. I don't think the residents would feel they have as well, in terms of proposals for alternatives at Ealing and Charing Cross. So yeah, certainly we would need to explore that.
I've only got a small point. In fact, I just want to pick your brains generically as a politician, how you would see things. Now, presumably as a politician, you're in receipt of petitions, and I noticed that in the decision-making business case, the executive summary, when they're looking at, they say there were a total of responses. I think this is to the Mori investigations and polls, etc., of 17,000, but they only count the petitions as 18. Now, presumably that means 18 petitions containing many thousands of responses. Now, would that be a normal way of a politician assessing a petition?
Well, as a politician, the ultimate petition is when I'm up for re-election, and the good people of Greenford Broadway, which is the ward I represent, or the good people of Ealing speak. And the interesting thing, of course, is at the last local council elections last May, health services and the hospital reconfiguration issue was probably the number one issue, and it's fair to say that as the ruling Labour administration, which talked positively about how we were trying to protect local health services, we increased our majority significantly. Our neighbours, obviously, in Hounslow, Brenton, and most spectacularly in Hammersmith and Fulham, did the same. So I do believe that there's a democratic mandate for the positions that we as councils are taking. And yes, there was all kinds of fudges going on in terms of how they counted the petitions, or we had literally tens of thousands of postcards that people sent in and signed, and because they were they allowed individuals to write their own personal comments on those postcards, but they also had a kind of standard template at the top as well. You know, they were all kind of discounted almost as you know, actual just kind of round robin type petitions that didn't really, or postcards that didn't really reflect what people thought. But actually, again, in my experience as a politician, knocking on lots of doors and talking to people, irrespective of their political views, they are united in their opposition to these proposals, and that is very, very marked.
Thank you both very much indeed for your presentation, and we'll pass to the next witness, please. Thank you.